So you want a lizard, but you don't want to deal with UVB bulbs. Well, I've got you covered. Today we're going to go over 5 lizards that you can keep without using a UVB bulb. I'm Adam. You're watching Wicked's Wicked Reptiles. Stick around. Now, before you can even finish that scathing comment that you're writing in the comments section, I understand and I agree that UVB is beneficial for even the lizards on this list. However, I wholeheartedly believe, and so does every study done by someone who is qualified, all of the animals on this list don't need UVB to be perfectly healthy. So let's kick it off. Number 5, frog-eyed geckos. Now, I could do a list of all the basics, right, that I've talked about on this channel a million times, but frog-eyed geckos I've never really talked about. I would love to have them, but where I'm from, they're super expensive, but they are very, very cool. Look at them. They've got these giant eyes, and if you're wondering, is that why they're called frog-eyed geckos? Yep, that's why. And these guys, I think, look very different than a lot of other geckos. Now, you might be wondering, well, why don't I see these everywhere? They look awesome. Well, a couple reasons. Although they only take a small amount of space, the same as, say, I don't know, like a leopard gecko like you see here, 20 gallons, for example, would be perfect for these guys. They don't really like to be handled as much as someone like my friend Littlefoot here. They do run away from you. They're pretty active, so they'll come running out of their burrows, which you should definitely give them hides, of course, like every animal. And they'll come and see what you're doing, but when you stick your hand in there, they're likely going to run away from you. They're very hard to tame down in comparison to a lot of other lizards that are more commonly found in reptile shops, pet shops, and expos. Another reason that they're not found as often as other geckos is they're really hard to breed. So if you have something that's really similar that'll make you whatever money that you need in order to keep your reptile hobby free, which is why I do it, why would you go with frog-eyed geckos? I mean, they're so similar to everything else, and they're harder to sell because they're more expensive, but they are really cool, and if you're looking for something different, frog-eyed geckos are amazing. And just the way that they act, they do this head-tilting thing, which I think is awesome. I don't know, I think that they're really cool. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, they're really cool, I might not get them, but I want to know more about them, they do come from parts of Asia, hot, dry, scrubland, rocky outcrops, just to give you an envisionation, is that a word? Just to let you envision what these guys would look like out in the wild and what habitat you'd want to set up for these guys if you got one. So let's move on to number 4, something you could find a lot easier. Number 4, African fat-tailed geckos. And we talked about these guys a few weeks ago in this video up here. I think they're amazing. These are great geckos, especially for somebody who doesn't want something super common, but something that is very easy for beginners to take care of. And I know a lot of people will say, well, they've got this humidity thing going on. That is true. If you can work a spray bottle, you're qualified to have an African fat-tailed gecko as long as you've done your research, of course. But that's what makes them different than some of the other geckos that we're going to get to on the list, or some of the other lizards, I should say, on the list. And what makes these guys great is, well, the no UVB thing, but that's going to go for everybody on the list, but they don't need a ton of space. 20 gallons is more than enough for one gecko. If you want 2 together, of course, only females together, never house full-time a male and a female, and for not even 1 second 2 males together, because you're going to end up with just one and then a mess that you'll have to get off the tank with a hose. 40 gallons for 2 is what I would suggest. And that's, of course, if you're okay with cohabbing. If you're not, totally understand it, always safer to keep them by themselves. And these guys, the heat and humidity are not difficult to keep at all. I mean, there is some consideration, right? Because with leopard gecko, the humidity is going to be low enough that it's like a non-factor. Unless you live in a swamp, it's going to be okay in your home. With these guys, you do need to mist them a bit. Give them a human hide for sure, which you should with a leopard gecko anyway. I don't know why we're doing a direct comparison. But also, they've got a few morphs as well. This is really cool because they do look substantially different to someone who knows something about reptiles to other geckos. So if that's something that you're after, something that's a little bit different, African fat-tails might be for you. Let's keep it rolling. Number 3, one of my all-time favorites, blue-tongued skinks. And you guys will know, since I've started the channel less than a year ago, I've gotten myself my first blue-tongued skink, an Irian blue-tongued skink named Irwin. This is Irwin, and he is beautiful. I love him, and if you want to know the difference between Irian or Indonesian in general and northern, one of the telltale signs, Indonesians a lot of the times have these black arms like you'll see on Irwin. There's a few other things as well, longer tails and so forth. Blue-tongued skinks have several different species. They come from different parts of the world. Indonesia, like I mentioned, parts of New Guinea, I believe, and Australia as well. So it depends where you want to get them. Of course, Australian ones, northerns, is what they're called, are a little bit more expensive, sometimes harder to find because Australia hasn't exported their animals in a long time, where Indonesia has no problem just shipping them in buckets on boats. So it's a lot cheaper to find in Indonesia, and that's why I got Irwin, because I just wanted a blue-tongued skink, because that is the first reptile I remember ever. I remember Steve Irwin on some late-night talk show, and he brought a blue-tongued skink, a northern, of course, and it started peeing on the host. And that was my earliest laugh I've ever got from a late-night talk show, which I was up too late, probably, to watch at 5 years old. But anyway, I love blue-tongues. They're amazing. Of course, I do think that UVB would be beneficial for a diurnal lizard from places like Australia and Indonesia, but there's a million studies out there that you can look at that'll tell you they do completely fine without UVB. In fact, they thrive without UVB. That's what we're striving for, not good enough, but giving the best quality life that they could possibly have. And if you don't need to spend an extra $50 twice a year on a UVB bulb and it does no difference, why would you spend that extra $100 times however many animals that you have that don't need UVB? That is the reasoning in my head of why you wouldn't provide everything with UVB. If, say, you breed leopard geckos like I do and you use a tub system, UVB maybe benefits them 1%, but if they do completely fine, why would you take so much more space and make such a hassle for you that might make you want to not even go in that reptile room because of how much extra work it is to keep all the enclosures like that when you could just not have it and they are fine. Something very different about blue-tongued skinks is they need a much larger enclosure than we've talked about earlier. 60 gallons is what I would say at minimum. I mean, a 55 might work, but I like to keep Irwin in a PVC, so it's 4 feet by 2 feet by 1 foot. They don't need a lot of space. They got these little sausage bodies and these tiny little legs, so they're not going to be climbing on much other than his little hide right here. So you don't need a ton of space up top, but you want some room because they do get to a substantial size in terms of lizards that are going to be on this list. I believe he's the biggest one, in fact. So as long as he got the space and he's got a day-night cycle and, of course, the hot spot and the temperature range, of course, cool side and warm side, you're good to go. And then with the diet, that's what I really love about blue tongues because they eat pretty much everything. I mean, you can feed them premium dog food, premium cat food as a mix with vegetables, a little bit of fruit, and you can feed them like prepared diet. Canned snails is one of Irwin's favorite things, and mealworms, earthworms. You can feed them a ton of different stuff. Do your research. This is not a care guide, but if you want one, bam, I got you covered. If you like the list so far, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button, and let's go back to the list. All right, 2 left. Let's start with number 2 on the list, leopard geckos. That's right, it is your time to shine there, Littlefoot. This is one of my favorite species to keep because, like, look how darn cute they are, first of all. Second of all, they're super easy. They are so easy. If you are the type of person that isn't home for 3 or 4 days at a time sometimes, leopard geckos will have no problem. They won't miss you one bit as long as everything's on a timer and, of course, they're fed and they've got water and everything that you need. But they're not difficult to keep whatsoever. Space requirements a little bit more forgiving than blue tongues as well. 20 gallon is perfect in my opinion for one. If you want to cohab them, of course, do your research on this, even if you think it's okay. 40 gallon for 2 is what I would suggest, and then more and more, I don't know. I don't think you should cram a bunch in there all together. But with these guys, I don't think you need a basking light. I prefer to have a basking light just to give it some light. But under tank heat is probably your best bet with these guys. In my tub system, which I use for my breeding leopard geckos, that's how I heat them. So hot side, cool side, like normal. Very easy on the humidity. Somewhere right around 40%. Again, if you want a care guide, bam, leopard gecko care guide right there. And then their diet is really easy too because they're only going to eat insects, just like African fat tails and the frog-eyed geckos that we talked about first. So mealworms is the staple diet for my geckos, and of course crickets as well. I don't just feed one thing. They'll get superworms sometimes, a whole bunch of different things, dusted with calcium and sometimes D3. Again, check out the care guide and do your own research to make sure you get the supplementation and diet perfectly. And also, they're the most handleable by far on this list. I mean, Irwin is okay with handling. He'll squirm around and he'll hiss at me a bit, but he's fine. He doesn't mind it after you get him up in the air. Even my girlfriend, who doesn't really like reptiles all that much, or she's not super comfortable with them, I should say, she does like them, but she'll handle them, right? So it's pretty easy. With leopard geckos, anybody can handle them. Just don't grab their tail, because it might fall off if you grab it too hard, and be gentle, because they're small, right? So that is leopard geckos in a nutshell. I love these guys. I cannot recommend them enough. Alright, number 1. Take a second. What do you think it is? Put it in the comment section below. If you guessed, number 1, crested geckos. You're correct. And I think that most of you probably saw this coming. I do a lot of videos about crested geckos. I think in terms of geckos, they're probably the easiest. And actually what I'm going to do for this list, because it's a don't need UVB list, crested geckos and gargoyle geckos. Very similar, not the same of course, but similar requirements, similar diets. They come from New Caledonia. They come from the same place. So I think that we'll put them together. They need a smallish enclosure, but higher, right? Everything we talked about so far needs more floor space than height. Crested geckos and gargoyle geckos, on the other hand, need something taller. So what I prefer for 1 or 2 is to keep them in an 18 by 18 by 24 Exoterra. Someone commented that gargoyles need a little bit more space. I think that is true. I've never kept gargoyle geckos, so I've never like deep dived into that, or deep dove. I don't know. Either way, do your research first. This is not a care guide, but crested geckos, I would consider myself at least enough knowledgeable to make a care guide, which I did, by the way. So you can check that out. They don't need UVB. They don't need a light at all. As long as they've got some form of hot and cool, or at least a little bit different temperatures, you're good. But because they're from New Caledonia, they don't need it super hot, and they don't need it super humid. So as long as you have the proper range, you're good. In fact, I don't have a heat source at all for my geckos, and because they're kind of close to heat source just regular for my home, like a register, they have it a little bit warmer at the top and a little bit cooler at the bottom. It's about a 3-degree Fahrenheit window, and at night it does have a drop as well, but I know you're thinking, well, these guys probably eat insects too. No, you don't need to feed them insects at all. That's why they're number 1. They're easier than everybody else, because you literally feed them prepared gecko diet. Clark's makes it, Repashy makes it, there's another company, Pangea, makes it as well. You just mix it up, put water, stir it up with a pen cap or whatever, toss it in there, spray down the enclosure, and that's it. Do that once every 2 days, and that's how you take care of a crested gecko. It really is that easy. I mean, of course, if it's not a bioactive enclosure, you'll need to scoop out the poop every once and then, but in my opinion, of reptiles, this is the easiest reptile to keep, period. So there you go. And the reason I did this video is because someone asked for it in the comments section. So if you want to see a video made, put it in the comment section. If you liked the video, I'd really appreciate it if you smash that subscribe button, smash the like button. Because I do videos twice a week, that means that I'll see you on Monday.